Hello there, and welcome to the Time Machine with Trish and Mike. I'm Mike.
And I'm Trish.
And we're glad you're with us once again for what, is not necessarily going to be the funnest episode we've ever done, but is somewhat of a significant moment, as we'll get into in a minute. But how are you, Trish? How was your week?
My week was good. Yeah, getting back into routine of school lunches and getting to work on time and being awake. I'm not a morning person, so I really struggle. Yeah. Love my job, hate the morning.
and I would imagine it takes you a little while to kind of get in the routine of school and everything.
And with my girls, it's the first year that my oldest is walking the youngest to school. Like we don't have before or after school care this year. So that's kind of, we're ironing that out. Yeah. Luckily their dad and stepmom live very close, and so stepmom is home this year, and we're able to kind of keep an eye on them.
Good. Well, that's good. So, that makes it easier, because I mean it's weird for me, because I mean obviously when I was a kid, of course I did school and you have summers off and everything, but I'm trying to think of the right verb to use. I will say if you work more of a traditional job schedule, I don't want to say teacher's not a real job. I don't mean what I'm saying that way. Most people don't have 3 months off a year. And I know that, you're doing stuff during those 3 months. I don't mean, but those of us that work 52 weeks a year, it's like we take a vacation and it's like, okay, you take a few days off, maybe you take a week off and I don't want to go back to work. But when you get to take a couple of months off at a time, you really don't. It's really hard, I would imagine.
Yeah. At least in Canada, we get 2 months off. I know you guys you leave in May and you go back in August, right?
Yeah, I mean, roughly, it kind of varies. Yeah, we've talked into this a little bit before. Like I know here, it's usually late May when the kids get out, and then they go back mid-August. So you're looking at 2.5 months ish.
Yeah. And you're right. And there's teachers. I know a lot of teachers in the United States take a second job. So there's some of that happening. I did a bit of work over the summer, but yeah, taking like multiple weeks off, you can get really into bad habits, like staying up way too late, like I did.
Watching Netflix, watching Hulu, whatever.
Yeah. Doing random things because I'm a night owl. But
yeah.
Oh, this week also marks my mom's birthday. So
happy birthday, Mom. Miriam. Yes.
Her birthday's on the 8th. So I wish I was home to celebrate.
Yeah, well, that was, Well, I hope she had a good birthday. At least she's getting to listen to us. So
that's true.
At least that's something. But glad you get to spend some time with her this summer. So yeah. Shall we get into it?
As you said, this is not the most. It's an important episode. It's an important topic to unpack, especially given recent world events. But definitely not our fun, normal, bar trivia-esque episode.
Yeah. So, of course, on September 11th, 2001, a group of foreigners invaded America and unleashed an act so heinous that we are still feeling the reverberations of it to this day. And of course, I am referring to the day that the Canadian rock band Nickelback released their Silver Side Up album in America.
I can only apologize for my local Albertans for so many times. Okay, so many times can I apologize for their existence. You all say you don't like them, but they sell millions of records, so somebody out there is buying it.
They do. And
I do appreciate your attempt at including some lightness to this, Mike.
That is, though, by the way, that is legit. That was the day that album was released.
It's brutal.
So, but they get a lot of crap, but as you said, they sell a lot of records. People like them. I don't like. I'm indifferent. Some of their songs are catchy, and they're like musically, their songs are pretty fun. The lyrics might be garbage, but there's a whole history of rock bands with garbage lyrics, but the music's good. So
Right.
But anyway, no, on a obviously a more serious note, of course, September 11th, 2001, Nickelback is not what you're thinking of. You're, of course, it's 20 years on Saturday, and it's in some ways, it feels like it's been maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. It doesn't feel like it's been 20.
No.
And the further away we get from it, the more removed you get. I mean, like there are kids obviously now graduating high school that were born after it happened.
Yeah, I remember teaching my first group that weren't actually born during the events, and that was really strange to me.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, obviously this is what we're discussing on this week's episode, but we can go through and we can give a timeline of events, but I'm sure people can look that up. I'm sure there's events that are going to be on TV this weekend that are going to rehash a lot of that stuff. But
yeah, I saw the History Channel is going to have 3 new documentaries. So.
Yeah, but it's a significant milestone. I guess let's just kind of start with that day because we were both in high school at the time. I'll start with you, Trish. How did you learn of this? Did you get to see it live? What was your that day like?
So I remember, because I was in grade 11, I was in chemistry. Actually, my boyfriend and I took the same chemistry class. So we were sitting at our table, we were working on a worksheet, and it was just before our recess bell, because of course, Nova Scotia is an hour ahead of New York.
Oh yeah.
And the events that happened, the news was kind of trickling out into news media. And my teacher was using his computer for something and reading the news, and it came up. And right before the recess bell, he took a moment and he said, I just want to let you know, in case you hear things in the hall, that this has happened in America. And we had one girl in our class, her father was supposed to be on a business trip at the Twin Towers.
Wow.
So she obviously gets really distraught, and she goes to the office to go get a hold of her mom. Because this is before we had cell phones. Well, some people in high school, I guess, did.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and it ties in a little bit to my story of that day. Cell phones are just starting to become a thing. Not everybody in high school has them nowadays. Nowadays, kids get phones when they're like 5. That was not the case back then.
No. I remember having to beg my father to use his, and it was like such an important, like, ooh, my dad's trusting me with the cell phone.
Yeah, in fact, 9/11 is actually the reason I wind up getting a cell phone.
Oh, really?
Yep. But anyway,
and I still was a couple years later. But yeah, so she's clearly distraught. I remember my teacher. So I don't know exactly the timeline because of the time change, but he did say that the Pentagon was also hit at this point, right before the recess bell. And I, in the class, was like, you mean the one, like the Pentagon? Like, and one of the boys in my class was a smartass and was like, no, the one in Africa or whatever, right? But in my mind, as a Canadian, like the Pentagon was such a structure that was so untouchable, unreachable. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you have things in your mind a certain way. And in my mind, it was like, there's no way anybody can go near the Pentagon. It's the Pentagon. Like it's depicted so often in movies and television and books, right?
Right.
And so I was very much like floored by all this information. And my class was downstairs, so I had to go upstairs. I got to my locker. I got my recess snack, and I walked through my mom's classroom. So my mom had a classroom with no windows, and she was in like the center of the upstairs, and she had a prep. And so I'm walking through her class to go to biology, and I'm saying, oh, Mom, like this is what I heard. Like, I don't know. And she often liked to put on CBC radio when she was doing her work in her class. And she told me afterwards she thought I was joking. And I'm like, why would I joke about something like that? Or why would that be a joke? But anyway, she turns on the radio and she starts listening. We go into our biology class, and of course, everybody's talking about it now at this. And my biology teacher's trying to get us to kind of focus and simmer down when an announcement comes on the PA that we are all to go down to the AV theater. And they go down into our drama room area, and they put on the big giant screens. And our whole school, grade 9 to grade 12, is sitting in this auditorium watching it live. And we see the buildings fall live, right? Like you could have heard a pin drop. And after the first building went down, that's when you could start to hear like people were crying and they're, wiping away their tears. And I'm an emotional person, so I'm kind of a bit of a wreck, thinking of, we have Nova Scotia and New York have very close connections, and thinking of my classmate whose father's supposed to be there and no one knows what's going on. And you're thinking, again, as a Canadian, America is America. Like, it can't be attacked. It can't.
Right.
It's the defender.
Yeah, and and that goes back to World War II and everything. Why Japan bombing Hawaii was such a big deal, because isolationism has always been one of the benefits. You can't really attack us because you can't get to us.
Yeah.
Because if you're flying in or you're coming in on a boat, we're gonna know who you are. It's hard to get. It's not like Europe or something where the borders are a little more friendly. Yes. Right.
Yeah. So it was very, very strange. And I remember thinking, like, if it's happening in New York,
it could happen
where else
anywhere.
Does it happen?
Yep.
Yeah. And I had a brother who he was starting to work for the government. Like, he does work for the government, but he was just working in the early stages. And so you're wondering what's happening behind the scenes. You're concerned. I had a brother working in the oil and gas industry, and there was all of these news alerts that, refineries were being targeted, and there was different targets in Canada that were highlighted. And so you're just very much concerned. And it was a very surreal experience just watching it live with all of my classmates and my teachers, trying mentally to kind of understand what you're watching. And now as an adult, and you're thinking, and as a teacher myself, it's like, I get that it was important for us to watch this, but I don't think we realized the trauma we were exposing ourselves to.
Yeah.
Right. And how, on one level, it was extremely inappropriate to watch, because you're literally seeing people die. Like, there, you could see the people jumping out of the tops, and you're trying to process what you're watching. And then going home, and my family, I was the only kid at home at that point, watching the news with my parents all night, trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, and it's different because we were both in high school, so it's you're still in some sense a kid, but you're somewhat an adult. Even if you're a freshman, you at least have some more knowledge of what's going on in the world, as opposed to like a second grader or something. So I can't imagine elementary school kids are sitting there watching a lot of this. I don't know that. Obviously I wasn't in elementary school at the time. But at least with high school kids, you kind of can start to grasp some of what's going on. But
it definitely affected, like, it affects me obviously now 20 years later. Like, when you're flying, there's things in the back of your mind when you're any of these terrorist attacks. That's the whole point, is to instill a what if, right?
Yeah. So for me, so we would have at the beginning of second period our morning news that we did at the school. It was, like video, a morning news show, recapping, what the sports teams did last night or upcoming events or that sort of thing. And so typically when they would end, they would scroll, like a slideshow of upcoming, club meetings or whatever. And they'd run that for a few minutes, and then they'd switch the signal off, and it would switch back to channel 2 news, because it was, with the way our TV system were set up, that they broadcast on channel 4, which is what the channel 2 local news. But anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. Some people know what I'm talking about when I say that. But like, basically the school feed overrode that channel in our local thing. And so whenever the national news would pop back on, that somebody would get up and turn the TV off. Well, so slideshow ended and the news popped on, and you see this building smoking, and it kind of takes you a second, and you're like, what's that? And the one kid gets up to start to turn the TV off. He just hears the noise of the TV and knows that it's time to get up and do the thing. And so I'm in math class, and I'm looking up at it as he's starting to get up, and I see the second plane go in live.
Wow.
It's not the replay or anything. It's like, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, what did I just see? And just as he's about to turn it, because he's not really paying attention, he's going to turn it up. The teacher looks up and sees this big fireball. And so, he turns it off, and the teacher's like, wait, turn that back on for a minute. And so then we're kind of sitting there watching it. We thought there for a second it was a replay. And then we realized it was actually the second plane. And just at that point, you just kind of have a chill, like, what is going on? Like,
Mhm.
okay, this is all happening very quickly, but it's like, okay, one plane, maybe that's an accident. Like somehow that could, but
Right.
the second you know that this is a second plane, you immediately go into this is a problem. What is going on? What else is there?
Yeah, there's something more here.
Right. And so we kind of watch it for a few minutes, and the teacher's like, all right, well, we'll turn off and we'll kind of, go do our work and everything. And so we finished that class. Then I go to my next class, which was a science class, and the teacher's got it on, and she's like, all right, we'll turn this off and, do work. And she starts to try to teach. She teaches for maybe about 2 minutes, and she's like, it's just not happening. We're just going to turn it on. And everything. And I'll never forget my friend Kat, that sat behind me in that science class. She actually had a New York shirt on with like the Statue of Liberty and everything that day. It's just one of those in hindsight. So it's eerie in some ways.
One of those things that is always going to stick in your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing when you go through events like this, it's little details that you just remember. And so the teacher turned the TV on about the time that the first tower collapsed, and it just, and then you kind of go through the rest of the day, and it's like chorus was my next class, and we didn't do anything. We're just watching the news, and pretty much everybody in chorus that day lined up to use the teacher's phone to call, just to call home, just to, whatever, because we didn't have cell phones really at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I called my mom. She's like, yeah, I'm going to come get you. So, pick me up. And I mean, because you just didn't know at this point, the Pentagon's been hit. I mean, you don't think schools are being to be attacked, but it's just, as a parent, you get it. I mean, so.
Oh, I was so lucky. At least my mom was
at the school. Right. Yeah.
Be with her. Yeah.
So.
No, and I can't even imagine what it was like like I said, as a Canadian, how much it shook me. And it's not my country, right? Like it's our biggest ally. So you're obviously very concerned. But as an American, that must have just hit so differently.
Yeah, for sure. And it really kind of would hit me about a week later. There's a spot on campus, because the high school I went to is a little bit south of downtown. And there's one spot where, as you're walking down one of the sidewalks, kind of, you can see part of downtown. Like you can see some of the bigger buildings downtown and everything. And I just kind of had a moment like the next week, one day, where I just kind of froze for a second and just looked at it and just like visualized it, like seeing that happen. And it just kind of, it just stays with you. You remember it.
Well, yeah. What also stays with me is the images of the people just covered in smoke and the paper. Mm-hmm. All the paper just floating in the air. Yeah. You're just like, where is all of this paper coming from? Mm-hmm. Right? Like it was just, I don't know. It was so hard to comprehend what was going on.
Yeah. And it's, I've started watching, I haven't had a chance to finish it yet. I'll add a moment of levity to this. My mom signed up for Hulu a couple weeks ago because she missed the first, the DVR didn't record the first season or the first episode of Bachelor in Paradise. No. so she didn't want to watch it on demand, like through the cable company box, because she didn't want to deal with commercials and everything. So she's like, what's that Hulu thing? Do they have it? And I'm like, yeah, they've got your show. So she signed up for a trial. And I say that to, again, add some levity to the moment. But I have started watching, there's a series on there called The Looming Tower. And it's a 10-part drama documentary, more of a drama, but based on facts of like 9/11. Like it goes back to, it starts with like Jeff Daniels plays one of the guys at the FBI, and like Alec Baldwin's in it. Like there's some names.
It's on. I mean, we don't get Hulu in Canada, so I'll have to like look for it elsewhere on other platforms.
No, it's a Hulu original, so I don't know if you will or not. But look, it's worth looking up. Yeah. So I'm about halfway through it, and it's interesting because it takes a look. It goes back to in 98 when bin Laden issued his fatwa against America, and it gets into the African bombings in Kenya and Tanzania and all that. I mean, like
everything leading up to the actual event.
Yeah, I think the last episode is like September 11th, so I can imagine where that episode's probably going to be pretty rough. But it's just been interesting to watch that.
Well, and it kind of, I mean, we've talked about the O.J. Simpson drama.
Yeah.
Right. And it like puts you back in that moment. Right. So I'm assuming watching this television show, like when they're kind of leading up to it, it'll put you back in that moment in high school. And it's very interesting to re-experience those events, but now as an adult.
Yeah.
That's what I always find interesting.
It is. And I will always say that our generation, and I say this as, people in their, 30s, is such a unique generation because we are the people who remember as a kid, landline telephones before cell phones, before laptops, before smartphones, but we've adapted to these things and we use these things. It's like we have enough old school in us, but enough new school in us. It's such a unique period. It's hard to imagine.
A generation that blended everything.
Right. But at the same time, the stuff that has occurred to our peers. I mean, things like the Columbine shooting, that happens when we're in high school and they picture, okay, I don't want to get into a big thing. Obviously, school shootings are still a thing.
But that really was a defining one.
But that was like one of the first.
Even here in Canada, it like stuck out.
Right. And then you have 9/11 happen while we're a senior. And then you have like the Virginia Tech shooting when we're kind of college age. It's like we've had these events that occurred to our peers and to our equals, and it's like and that's, you get into the stuff that's hit our generation harder than others. People like, oh, you're in your 30s, why aren't you married with kids and a house and 10 years into your mortgage? It's like, well, we've been through how many economy collapses and all this stuff. And I don't say this to be a woe is me thing when I say it.
No, but it is a reality of our generation, is that there's been things that we've had to struggle with.
Yeah, that other generations don't. They can't put themselves in that position. And again, I don't mean that to say that other generations don't have their own issues. I mean,
yes, we didn't, not to erase that.
We didn't get drafted to go to Vietnam. I get that. Every generation's got their stuff to deal with, but it's just, when you look at the events of, say, the last 30 years, that it's really, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'm just rambling at this point, but
I think
there's something to that. Yeah,
there is. And I mean, previous generations, there also wasn't the economic changes that happened following those events that we've had to then muddle through, right?
Right. So.
Yeah, I don't know. And then obviously with recent events that have been going on in Afghanistan.
Right.
Right. There was that video, actually my ex-husband sent it to me, and it literally put me back in that auditorium, right, in 2001, where you're seeing the people that are trying to get off at the Kabul airport, and they're holding onto the wings, and there's a video of 3 people falling.
Yeah.
And I instantly, it was back there seeing that image, and so surreal, thinking you'll never feel that again. And then it's this echo feeling, and it was very eerie for me.
Yeah. And you see that, it's people that are so desperate to get out of there. Oh. Because they've been there, they lived through, the Taliban's previous
they've been living through it for like how many years? Like way more than the 20 years it's been.
Right, and they're like, we can't go through this again. We have to get out of here, and it's very. I can't even imagine what those people are thinking, and I can't even imagine anyone who's served the U.S. or the Canadian military that has been there and has done thing.
Has to process these feelings.
Right.
That's a whole different level. Even my mom, when she heard what happened, instantly her mind went to a former student, Nicola Goddard, who was the first female officer who was killed in combat following the 9/11. And she's like, what was it all for? And it's like, well, that's not really a question for us. That's like veterans that have to. I mean, there's obviously good that was done. And I feel so awful for any of the veterans that maybe are questioning any good that was done. But the one thing I find really upsetting in the media is the amount of kind of anger and upset at the American government. And it's like, look, the American government wasn't the only one that was in there, and wasn't the only one that was trying to create peace over there. There's hundreds of, well, not hundreds, but there was multiple countries.
Right.
Like I think there was 36 countries involved.
Yeah. And anybody that wants to question, should we have gone there? Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I'm always going to say it was the right call, because we had to go get who did this. We know who did it. We know who enabled it. We had to go. Now,
well, it's like
you could say, we've made some mistakes along the way after the fact and all that. Yes, but the decision to go in there, I supported it.
Well, and I don't like the finger pointing all at one country.
Yeah.
It's like, this is way more than one country's issue.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, in every single combative mission, there's going to be things that happen that it's not always to plan or always the right decision, but that's hindsight, right?
Right. Some things you don't know what you don't know until, you do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why it's important to plan and everything. But yeah.
Yeah. And there's things that the general public does not know. Like, we do not know all of the inside facts and details of what's going on way behind the scenes.
Right. But if you just look at it on a basic level and go, okay, this guy is responsible for this attacks, and there's a government that's giving him shelter and letting him stay there, and they won't turn him over to us. Well,
they're just as guilty.
They're just as guilty, and you go in and get him. And it took 10 years, but as we've discussed, we got him. So there's a couple interesting kind of near misses, if you will, on 9/11. So actor James Woods was on a test run flight about a month before the attacks.
Oh, with when they were practicing what they were going to.
So he was on a flight from Boston to LA, and he noticed these four men who were, and this sounds profiling, I guess, if you will, but there were four men of Middle Eastern descent that were acting very strangely on the flight. They were very quiet. They didn't eat. They didn't drink. I mean, this is a Boston to LA. You're looking at a 6.5 hour flight. They're not eating. They're not drinking. They're just talking very quietly to themselves. It just seems suspicious. If you see something, say something.
Right.
And
it's a character regular.
Right. And so he told the flight attendant, and like he even kept his cutlery from the in-flight meal just so he at least had something that
So he definitely has he had a creepy feeling.
He had, exactly.
Yeah,
and it
turned listening to his intuition.
Come to find out, these were four of the guys involved in 9/11. And
wild.
so he reported it. Nothing ever came of it. And then on September 12th, he called the FBI to say, hey, I reported this to the flight crew that day. I know you're getting a lot of tips, but I'm just, letting you know.
FYI.
So the next day, September 13th, he calls them on the 12th, after the day after. So the next morning, he gets a call at 6:30 in the morning from the FBI. They're like, hi, Mr. Woods, we'd like to talk to you. He's like, okay, well, sure, I'll come down there and give me a little bit, and I'll come down there. Like, okay, well, we're outside waiting for you now. We'd like to talk to you whenever you're ready. Because they went through and they had the manifest and everything, and they're like, tell us what you saw.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
I can't even imagine. But you're right? Like, there's moments where you feel something's what's up. You got to go with that gut instinct.
Yeah, because hijackings had been a thing in the 70s and 80s. They didn't happen so much in the 90s, but they were usually for ransom purposes or hostage. Like, oh, we want this person released from prison, or whatever. They weren't, hijackings weren't being used as a weapon. Right. Yeah. And of course, there's a very famous story of Seth MacFarlane was scheduled to be on Flight 11, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to LA, but he slept over a little bit. He was a little hungover, and his assistant had given him a wrong departure time. So he got to the airport too late to board. It's about 15 minutes too late. And so he didn't get on the plane. Yeah. Well,
and that was the thing with the student in my class. Her father's meeting had been changed or something. So he actually wasn't in the building. But these near misses, again, talk about luck, right?
Right. Well, it's like, so the 9/11 attack kind of goes back to, do you know what the Bojinka plot was?
Was this the one, wasn't there an earlier one, like in 92 or something?
Yeah, so this was planned in 1995. There were three phases to it. One was they wanted to assassinate Pope John Paul II when he visited the Philippines. So a few of the guys in Al-Qaeda had an apartment that they were renting, and there was going to be a direct line of sight that they could have gotten, and they were going to have a suicide bomber try to get close, dressed up as a priest, and blow himself up. A couple days later, they were planning to blow up 10 flights, 10 transit Pacific flights that were going from Asian countries to America. They
so not even doing anything about, not using them, but just
blowing the planes up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was a third phase where they wanted to load a small plane with explosives and fly it into the CIA headquarters. Obviously, none of these things happened, kind of because you got lucky. The guys were assembling the bombs about a week before, and there was a chemical fire, and that kind of, they scattered at that point, and they went in and investigated, and they found all the stuff to make bombs and everything, and they kind of unraveled the plot. But you take the little different phases of that, and that's kind of how you wind up getting the 9/11 plan, if you will. But
yeah, wild. You just think of the desperation of people to have to even contemplate such an act.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few inspiring moments, I thought, that kind of came, from 9/11. I don't know if you have any. I mean, I know, again, I don't want to get into the politics of everything, but there was a moment a few days later when President Bush went down to the World Trade Center site, and he's there meeting with the rescue workers and everything. He's thanking everybody. He's got the bullhorn. He's thanking everybody, and one of the the rescue workers yells, he's like, "I can't hear you." And everybody, if you just look up President Bush bullhorn speech, you're gonna know what I'm saying. But he's like, "I can hear you, and the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us." And it's just like, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna get these guys that did this to us. And
well, even just when he goes on the news that night.
Oh yeah,
right. Like he's shuttled around. I love it when people are like, "Oh, they're like," when something like this happens, they're like, "Oh, the leaders are hiding."
They have to do that.
They have no idea. I mean, like they make fun of President. They make fun of Prime Minister Harper when there was the shooter at the Parliament Hill, and they're like, he's hiding in a closet. No, he's being protected by Secret Service in a closet.
Well, it's like, yeah. And to President Bush that day, you're a teacher. You're going to totally empathize.
That video sticks in my mind. He
is at a school in a room with children. His chief of staff comes and tells him what's happened. And you look at that man, you can tell he's thinking about what he's being told. And he's clearly not really paying attention to anything else.
Yeah, to the teacher anymore.
But he's not freaking out. He does not get up and run. He does not cause a scene. He stays there with the kids. And again, in hindsight, you can see
concern, you can see preoccupation, but you do not see like fear or
right.
Like if I heard that news, I would be starting to cry. Like,
yeah, I mean, in hindsight, could you probably have thought about getting him out of there quicker, because it was known where he was going to be, and at this point, you don't know that there's not a plane on its way to him. Right. Maybe, but it was that moment of calm, like, okay, all right. And then he lets the kids finish reading to him or whatever it was they were doing, and he leaves and he gets his thoughts together and gives a speech.
He shuttled around. He finally makes it back to the White House at 7 p.m. And then has a televised address at 9. And so that's 10 o'clock my time when I'm watching it. And you're kind of freaking out all day since the early morning. Like it's been 12 hours.
Yeah. I mean, he'd given a few speeches throughout the day. Like I know when they got him to Louisiana, to Nebraska, he gave a couple little speeches.
But seeing him in the White House, that was kind of a moment of calm for me, where it was like, okay, they're going to handle it. And
I go back to Peter Jennings. He was the ABC News anchor. Of course, he's one of your beloved Canadians. I mean, he was on the air that morning and he stayed on that night. I still remember watching it like 1 or 2 in the morning and he was still on. I mean, he was on the air for 14 something hours.
I remember when the journalists were like, you got to go, we got to turn off. Like we have to all go rest.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I know here, I think from the moment it happened until I want to say it was probably sometime Saturday afternoon, it was 24/7 news on, not just on like the normal, like ABC or NBC. I mean, they literally, they would ran all night, but like even like ESPN was just simulcasting the ABC news because they had affiliation with them. MTV was not broadcasting. They were simulcasting CBS News. Like there was a couple of days where you were not getting, you weren't getting anything. And you didn't want to, because you had to keep watching. You didn't know what was going to happen. And another moment that sticks out to me, that if you pull it up on YouTube and you start playing it, I'm going to start getting goosebumps. Is I think it was on September 13th at the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace when they, the guard, guard shift, and they don't play God Save the Queen. They play the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's just such a moment,
Especially considering your guys' very interesting history between the two countries. But right away, it was very much, at least in Canada, it was like, okay, how are we going to help like Americans? I remember they were desperately looking for blood donations, and they're like, they were going to be utilizing the blood donation. I wasn't old enough yet to give blood. But the first time I attempted to give blood was directly because I wanted to, because of this event. So at the university, they brought in a blood drive, and when I was old enough, and it was the first one I could participate in, sadly, I didn't get to do it because I had undiagnosed anxiety at the time, and my heart rate never gets below 100 beats per minute, apparently, when I'm stressed. So I couldn't. But you found other ways to help out and donate. And I remember, like, at the time, in 2001, finding ways to donate and help, like money wise. Yeah. But it was very much like a team effort. It was like, we're going to help our allies.
Oh, I remember, like, after Pulse happened, I mean, within a few hours, there's a line probably half a mile long of people waiting to go donate blood.
See, and those are the things I cling to after these kinds of events.
Absolutely.
The people that are like, no, we're not going to let, horrible, awful, degenerate people ruin our society. We're better than that. We're going to do the good.
Exactly. I agree. Any closing thoughts or anything?
I mean, like you said at the beginning of the segment, I still can't believe it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'll be watching the documentaries I do every year because I'm always fascinated in seeing kind of new perspectives or new facts or whatever else they find to kind of present to us. But the biggest thing, like I just said, that'll be a takeaway is being the good, right?
Yeah.
Looking for the helpers. And I was also severely impacted because my dad is a volunteer firefighter. And so seeing all the firefighters, that's just really close to my heart. And I think that the world is a better place when we choose to do those good actions.
Yeah.
And to show that we won't be broken by something evil.
Oh, I agree.
So going forward, that's how one should live, I think.
I totally agree. But I think you said it pretty well. It's 20 years, but just like with anything, just focus on the good. Out of any bad, there's always going to be something good that comes of it. And when that happens, that, it wasn't in vain. It wasn't whatever, like there's always going to be something good that comes from something.
Yep.
So
focus on that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that being said, I know we just came back from a break and it's like, hey, this is kind of a heavy episode, but it was right. It's significant. It's a milestone anniversary, and it was the only thing I felt that, as we had discussed before, as we were discussing topics, it's like it
didn't feel right not to have just a special about it.
Right. It's not something we could have done in a 10-minute segment, and there's really no way to transition back to doing a regular show after you talk about this. But we'll be back next week, with the normal show, as you've come to expect. We're glad you're back with us. Trish, tell the folks how they can get in touch with us.
Yeah, if you have any questions, queries, comments, or concerns, you can find us at The Time Machine with Trish and Mike on Instagram, The Time Machine with Trish and Mike at gmail.com. You can find us also our audio on YouTube. Please hit subscribe. If you want to leave us a voice message, maybe you want to share your thoughts or opinions on anything that we've shared in this special about 9/11, you can leave us a voice message in the Anchor.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll catch you next week right here on The Time Machine.